everybody and welcome to our Game of Thrones review. And with no one being episode 8, there was some kind of loose ends kind of being tied up. It's good to see Arya's storyline kind of in Braavos come to an end. It's great to see the Hound. I love the gratuitous violence. I'm absolutely a big fan of that. It's even better seeing violence from the mountain, but obviously now we know there's not going to be any Clegane ball. I'm kind of pissed. 2 off-screen deaths were not great, but I really liked the Riverland scene with Brienne and Jaime. So let's get into the review, picking up where we left off with Sandor in the last episode, and he's in the Riverlands and he has literally got an axe to grind, and he comes across these brothers without banners, but not the ones that he's looking for. And this guy is basically just being felt up by one of his so-called brothers when they were playing a joke on him, and Sandor comes along and just lops the head off, and that's the start of the violence, and it's really fast, and all the while he's growling and grunting, and he's very animalistic, very the Hound. The second one he just hacks straight through, and what I loved was the speed and the noise, hearing it clunk and hit and bone, and it just shows how fast he is and how strong he is, because the last one, the second to last one, he slices across the throat, almost decapitating it, and you just know that was not pretty. And the final one, the only one left standing, he literally cuts him right up the chuff, and it's a hard thud, lots of blood gushing. It's terrible, but I loved all the violence and stuff. And when he's got him down on his knees, because at that point, missing your genitals, you're going to end up on your knees, he says, "Where's the guy? Where's the other one? Where's the one with the yellow cloak, I should say." He says, and the guy goes, "Fuck you!" So he's still got something to say, and he says, "Are they really your last words? Do you really want them to be your last words?" And he says, "Pick something else." And he says, "Cunt." He says, "You're shit at dying." And he just lifts up the hanger and, pardon the language, he meant, fuck you, right down on the head. So he carries on down the road. We come across some familiar faces, and we haven't seen them since season 3. Now, it kind of puts to bed one storyline that I was hoping was going to happen, but I'll talk more about that at the end. And they're hanging them for the crime that Sandor's wanting to get revenge for. And Sandor's bargaining with them. He says, I want to kill them all, and I want to kill them with the axe, and they won't let him. So in the end, they let them. Beric gives Sandor 2 to kill, and he chooses the one in the middle with the cloak and the one on the left. And what's really funny is there's this interaction where they're bargaining, and Sandor just mentions the fact, I killed you before, I can do it again, and that's a good playback to series 3. And it's really good seeing an interaction with these characters, and you're kind of going, well, if they're not here for what are they here for, really? It's kind of weird to just bring them back for whatever reason. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the book storyline, but they sit down with Sandor because Sandor's like, "Have you got anything to eat?" And he's tucking into some ribs, and they're obviously not chicken because he's like, "Oh, I prefer chicken." And that leads back to when he was with Aria in the inn, and they're using the same rhetoric that you expect. The Lord of the Light has a reason for bringing, Beric Dondarrion back so many times and giving Thoros of Myr, a failed red priest, the ability to bring back people from the dead. And they're talking about the fact that he must be alive for a reason as well, because you managed to kill Beric Dondarrion. And Sandor says, quite frankly, "No, I killed you because I'm better than you. I was better than you before you became all red god infatuated." And there's this bit where Rory, aka Sandor, pulls out his little willy, or in this case not so little willy. I think it's his actual dick, but they cut away for the peeing because obviously that'll be just a water pouch, because most people can't pee on command. But it's really funny to see they're trying to coax him towards their cause, and that's when Thoros of Myr and Beric say, "We're here for a reason. There's something stirring up in the north." And they allude to the fact that it's the White Walkers, and they literally come out and say it. "We'd really like you to join us," because obviously Sandor's alive, he's strong, he's obviously someone that they see has got a purpose, and the Red God's got a purpose. And Sandor doesn't say no, which in My opinion means that if he doesn't say no, it means he might just agree. And if he's going north, you never know, he might come across some other northerners that we've liked before. Come on, Stark reunion with a, I know he didn't get on with most, but remember, he was really nice to Sansa, and he did kind of have a relationship with Arya in the end, so that would be cool to see. We then move on to King's Landing, where Cersei gets an unwelcome visitor in Lancel and the High Sparrow's lackeys, the Faith Militant, and they're there to take her to the Great Sept of Baelor, where she's supposed to meet with the High Sparrow. And she says, I'm not going, you can tell her I'm not coming. And he says, it's not a request, you're commanded to come. And she says, well, you can come and visit me at the Red Keep because I'm not going. And the Mountain stands in front, and at that point Lancel says, order your man to move aside, sir, move aside, or there will be violence. And she says that immortal line from the series trailer, I choose violence. And at that moment, one of the lackeys, obviously not Lancel, he steps further back, whacks this really archaic looking weapon with these about 4 prongs, and you hear it thunk, and it obviously makes it through the armour, but the mountain is a mountain and doesn't move. And they're all standing back there terrified when the mountain picks up this man. Now, when he pulled back his weapon, there was no blood, no nothing. And he's horrified. He gets picked up, he gets throttled and thrown on the ground. And when he's on the ground, it looks like, oh, is he going to choke him with that chain? That's a bad idea. That's a horrible way to dress, because now the mountain's going to use it to kill you with. And then you realise the mountain doesn't even need your stupid chains, because he just rips the head right off. And as you can see from the arrow that I'm pointing at, it's not just his head and the spurt of blood. He's actually pulled out his spine. He's actually fully retracted it. And it just reminded me of when you take apart shellfish. It just reminds me of that. You hear the crunch and the spout of blood, and the body's lying on the ground, bleeding out. You see his hand, the dead, now former Faith Militant member, just twitching, and Lancel looks terrified, and this still shows it all. And you're like, I hope you're wearing the brown pants, pal, because you're going to be shitting. If you haven't shit yourself, you're going to shit yourself now. And you realise that they can't beat him, and they saw what he did to one of their members, and obviously at that point they up and leave. Now that's obviously not the end of it, because as we find out, the High Sparrow has anticipated this. Fresh from murdering sparrows, Cersei enters the great throne room, and even though the mountain's armour's been tarnished, it actually makes him even more badass. And as he walks in, you realise that he is literally head and shoulders above everybody else. He is literally the mountain, even if he's not fully what he was. He's obviously monosyllabic and everything. And Cersei comes up, and she's stopped by her uncle, Kevin, and he's basically like, you don't belong down here, you belong up in the gallery with the other ladies. And you just realise that Kevin was not a strong lion like his brother Tywin, and he is just going along with the status quo, which is stupid. And Tommen decides to make his speech sitting on the throne, and he's nervous, and he's touching the edge of the throne, and he's sort of fiddling, and you can tell he's nervous. And that's when he announces there'll be no more trial by combat, that Cersei and Loras will be tried by 7 good Septons, because he's outlawing this whole barbaric trial by combat, because it just serves to help the corrupt get away with, their guilty sins. And if ever that is a barb flung at his mother, I don't know what, because she's right there. And quite frankly, as he walks out, he looks unsure of himself, and I know he sits in an iron throne, but he doesn't have a rod of iron in his spine. He is literally jelly. And for all he said at the beginning of the season about how he wanted to get revenge and he wanted to be strong like his mother, he is foregoing his own mother for this so-called prayer. And they even end with 7 blessings to all, and everybody else goes 7 blessings, and you just realise, ugh. And it's something that I heard from other people talking about it. As much as it was, I don't like the storyline with the sparrows, but it does shake up everything in court. And as much as Cersei was self-serving, she was never really sticking out the feelers for other people. Like, not large amounts of people didn't suffer for what she wanted. It was more aimed at specific people she saw as a threat, whereas the Sparrows here seems to be affecting everybody throughout the land. And remember, the whole point, even though the trial by combat is something done by man, the whole point is that if the gods saw you as innocent, then your champion would win. They're totally making out that that was never religious or anything like that. It's just some barbaric custom. Yet the Faith Militant that are supposed to be religious, they're walking around with the most barbaric looking weapons. But I digress. Either way, like I said, Tommen is just proving that although he's not crazy like Joffrey, he is an unfit ruler. And although they aged him up for the show, in the books I should say, he's a lot younger and he's more childish and he doesn't really care about politics. But it's just taken something, a weak child that nobody really cared about because he was just the spare. He becomes king, and his weakness in the fact that he was never thought of as much, he's just easily manipulated by other people to his own detriment, and even to someone he claims to love, his own mother. And I'm not Cersei's fan, but I totally felt that one. So whilst we're reeling from the fact that Cersei isn't going to get a trial by combat and the mountain isn't going to prevail and she's more than likely going to be found guilty and punished by these 7 septons at her trial, Maester Qyburn comes up to Cersei and says, "You know those rumours you asked me to investigate with my little birds?" And she says, "Is it a rumour or something more?" And he says, "More, much more." Now, there's only 2 things that I think it could mean. One, that the High Sparrow isn't who he said he is and they're going to use some sort of knowledge to try and get back at him, but I don't think it's that. The other one I think is becoming more likely is when I did the video on the Vision of the Mad King, there was images of the clay pots of wildfire from way back in Aegon's reign being put away. Now, the rumour was that Aegon had stockpiles of wildfire planted all over the city and that he was going to burn everything to the ground because when he was cornered he was just mad and he was going to take everybody with him. And I think that Maester Qyburn went round with these little birds to find out if these stashes are there. Now, in the vision you see the flames erupting from the vaults. Now, I said in a previous video that I thought maybe this is something that could have happened or might have happened. I think now it is something that is going to happen. I think Maester Qyburn, I keep saying his name wrong, it's Maester, as he's found the wildfire, he's confirmed it with the little birds, and now that's something that she's always said from way back early, that she's prepared to burn cities to the ground if she has to protect what is hers and protect what's hers, She is mad in a way that she keeps bringing up that she'll do really bad things if she has to. I mean, she almost poisoned Tommen at the Siege of the Blackwater when it looked like they might have been taken captive. She'd rather die than have her and her son die. So I think if this is true, and from the vision where you saw the wildfire ignited in that big green flame, Cersei could go, well, if I'm going down, I'm going to take these bastards with me, and I think maybe she's going to use this wildfire, and if that's true, we're looking at some pretty scary scenes coming up. As we return back to the Riverlands, we come to Riverrun again, and probably one of my favourite scenes of the whole episode, if not the series so far. Brienne and Pod are there, and there's this lovely exchange with Pod, and there's a moment when she's looking upon the siege and she sees Jaime. And what I really like about it is it's a slip up, I suppose, in her nightly duties, but it's really telling that while she's staring at him, and as much as she's not giggling like a schoolgirl, she's so enamoured watching him that Pod goes, "Lady, my lady, my lady," and she doesn't even realise a whole bunch of Lannister guards on horseback are surrounding her. But she keeps her cool and she says, "I'd like to see Sir Jaime, tell him I have his sword." And obviously maybe they weren't going to listen to her because she said, "I'm Brienne of Tarth," and she's escorted in to see Jaime, and Bronn comes across Pod and he fake out comes up behind him and basically shows, I've managed to get behind you, you're the famous Pod, you still squatting because I thought you were dead by now. And there's this whole repartee with Bronn saying, "Oh, have you fucked Brienne yet? Do you think she's gonna go in there and fuck Jaime?" Pardon the language, he just keeps saying it. But what's really nice is it's a nice reunion in a way. It was a short scene, but it was really good. Now, when they come in, Brienne is formal, and in a way, Jaime shows some of the heart that we don't always get to see. He congratulates her on fulfilling the vow she gave to Catelyn to at least find one of the daughters, and when she unbuckles the belt, he actually looks at her as if to say, of course she's going to give me back the sword. Of course she thinks that she has to. And he says, no, it's your sword, keep it. And it's a lovely repartee because she also gets a wee bit formal and says, if you let me go in and see the Blackfish and I can sort it out, we'll leave with the soldiers. And he said, on my word, you can. But she says, but if he doesn't and you lay siege, my honour means I'm going to have to fight for him and I'll have to fight against you. And he says, of course it does. But let's not think about that. And I really do believe that he honestly doesn't even want to think about having to get in a conflict with her because he respects her, and I suspect he does have feelings for her that he can't really own because he's so mired in the fact that he's with Cersei and she's his blood as well, and it's not like he can spurn her like an old girlfriend. There's always that link because they were womb mates in the womb, and that's some big special thing that they tell themselves to kind of excuse the reason why they are committing incest. And we move on from all this longing about what could be if I suppose circumstances were different to immediate circumstances to do with the Blackfish, the Tully army, and the Siege of Riverrun. He is on guard, and when Brienne and Pod come in, she wants him to read this letter, and he's adamant he's not reading it because he tells her, I haven't seen Sansa in years, I've got bigger things to worry about, I've got Jaime and his frickin', lackeys trying to get in here, and I'm not giving it up. And she says, please. And he says, what am I going to take words from you? Because obviously you're in with him because he's allowed you to come in and you're carrying his sword. And she tells him, the only reason I'm in here and I have his sword is because he wanted me to protect your niece, to fulfill a vow that he gave to Catelyn, and I'm going to protect her, and this is the letter that she wants you to read. And he softens for a lovely sweet moment, and he says, she's just like her mother. And Brienne smiles, and when Brienne smiles, it's very warming, right? But he says, I can't help her, I can't leave my home. I'm not going to leave my home. I can't go up. I'm no use to her. My arm, I've not got enough for her. And Brienne says, but you've got an army. You've got an army and you can help her get back Winterfell. And he says, I can't do it. He says, I've got my own problems here. He's basically saying, I'm in the here, I'm in the now, and I have to protect what is mine with everything that I have left, and I don't have as much to offer her even if I could. He can't literally see a way out of this situation, and he's prepared to stay those 2 years and wait out the Lannisters and the Freys because he thinks that he can, and he's got the might of right on his side. And it's unfortunate because as he walks away, Brienne is completely crestfallen, and she tells Pod to send a letter to Sansa in the north that she's failed. And you really feel that although she's done a great thing in protecting Sansa and pledging herself to her, she wants to take this one thing that Sansa's asked her to do and do it, and she doesn't want to tell her, no, I failed. At the same time, Brienne isn't going to pretend something's a good situation when it's not, and it's a shame because you really want Brienne to do well for Sansa. She wants to help Sansa in the one time that she's given the first real duty, and she can't carry it out. We then move into later in the night where Jaime rides on horseback further into camp, and he comes into the tent where Lord Edmure is being kept. And he starts off very nice. He says, I'll make sure that you're bathed and fed and you'll be better treated, on my honour. And of course Edmure doesn't want to listen to his honour because he says, you murdered my whole family and you've kept me prisoner for years. He says, what honour do you have? After all, you killed your own king. And this Jaime changes the conversation because obviously he has the power, and he says, you'll listen to what I've got to say. He says, you know about your son, right? Your son that was born, conceived on your wedding night. I can make sure you can be with him. I'll let you go at Castle Rock. You can be with your wife and son. I'll let him have a tutor and he'll be brought up, you know, and like I said, he talks about honour. And of course Edmure at this point just says, whatever man, I don't believe a word you have to say. And that's when the tone changes with Jaime. Now we're used to seeing Jaime trying to be honourable as he can, and Edmure questions him and he says, yeah, your good looks and square jaw and your golden armour, he says, how do you live with yourself? Do you know you're an evil man? And I think Jaime just reverts to type when he's called a Kingslayer and all that kind of stuff. He just reverts to like, well, if they think I'm that way, I'll be that way. And he says, you know what? I didn't like, Cersei, your sister didn't like me, but I didn't hate her. And of course Edmure doesn't want to listen to anything he has to say about Cat, but you know what? I respected her way more than her husband and any of her children. But she cared for her children and she would fight tooth and claw. And just like my sister, she's the same way. She would do anything for her baby. She would, burn cities to the ground if she had to. And that alludes to, Cersei's madness. But he says, whether you like it or not or care, I love Cersei. I'll do whatever I have to do to get back to her. And if that means catapulting your baby into the ramparts, if it means killing every Tully who ever lived to get back to her, I will. And you can see it dawn on Edmure. He realises how serious Jaime is, because like I said, he loves his sister, loves his sister, and he is prepared to say that, whether he'd actually have to do it. But it doesn't mean anything because Edmure is in the weaker position. And it goes back to that saying he said way back in episode 1, the things we do for love. And it's true, whether he knows he's going down a good path or bad, Jaime's going to do what he has to do to get back to Cersei, because there's always going to be that deep-seated love. And even though they've went through rough times and everything, he'll always go back to her. And Edmure realises, obviously, even though he doesn't think that the Blackfish will surrender, he's now going to have to be a pawn to get Riverrun back, or at least hand it over to the Lannisters and Freys. It then cuts to Edmure standing outside of Riverrun with a torch saying, let me in, I'm the Lord of Riverrun, let me in. And of course we know what that means. It means he's acquiesced to Jaime, not the other way around. He's not using this as his advantage to get with these people. And of course the Blackfish says, are you stupid? He isn't actually giving you an order. It's Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, with a knife at his throat. That order doesn't mean anything. And of course you keep hearing, open the gate for your lord. And he's like, you're fucking stupid. That's what he's saying. And he says, no, you're not opening it. He says, it's not a valid order. And they said, we're going to open it. And when the soldier he's talking to says, open the gate, the Blackfish partially unshaved his short. He says, I should chop your head off. Basically you're a traitor. And when he realises that they're all going to let him in, he walks off. And of course, what happens is, as soon as Edmure comes in, he goes straight up to the ramparts, tells the same soldier, manacle the Blackfish, hand him over to Freys, and open the gates and let in the soldiers. And that's when this soldier realised, you know what? I was thinking I could get out of this moral dilemma by listening to my heart and my mind and saying, open up for your lord. And he realises that he's essentially getting rid of this lord, because at the end of the day, Edmure means nothing to these people. And then the soldiers come marching in. They take the banners down and put up the Lannister and Frey banners, and the Rains of Castamere is playing on, and it's like, this is just more freaking betrayal. And this is the last still I have of the Blackfish. He realises, I'm not leaving. Brienne prays for him he says, please come with us, because they're going to leave in a boat. And he says, no, I ran at the Red Wedding and I'm not doing it now. I haven't had a good fight in years. I just hope I don't make a fool of myself. And obviously she's tried to acquiesce him. Come on, fight for your family. And at this point, I think the Blackfish, although he goes on about he's an old man, he's actually a lot more of a fighter, and he's actually a very good fighter. And you think to yourself, you know what? I wish they didn't do this. The showrunners didn't need to kill him off, but they're going that way. And he goes off, and obviously he dies off screen. Jaime's told so. And as he looks from the ramparts, he hears sort of this water, the the water being broken up by an oar. He sees Brienne and Pod in a boat. She turns round to look up at Riverrun, and he's the first one to wave. He lifts up his golden hand, and she lifts up her hand. And see, when he notices her, I actually hear his breath hitch, I should say. And when he sees her leaving, and with the music playing in the background, now not the Rains of Castamere, you just get this feeling that, like I put, parting is such sweet sorrow, but basically of what could have been. If the woman he loved wasn't his sister, maybe it could have ended a different way, but it's kind of like saying, for good or for bad, I'm in this. And as much as I totally could run off with Brienne, that there's possibilities there, you can tell that she saw the chinks in his armour and he wanted to be a better man, and that's what he admitted to. He realises that for all that hope, it's never going to be. But what he can do is let her and Pod leave. And he could have just totally have did what he was showing his ruthless side earlier and just call for the guards to go and get her, but he wasn't going to do that. The fact that he actually acquiesced earlier by saying, if you get the Blackfish to surrender, I'll let him leave with all the Tully army. And I believe, because he said, on my honour, I was going to do it. So it never worked out that way, because Edmure screwed over his own family, and quite frankly, he's surplus to requirements now. His son could easily be brought up to be the Lord of Riverrun, and because he's afraid, there's that connection with his mother and his grandparent, Walder Frey. He is completely useless, because anytime he could change his mind because he's spineless and try to maybe bring up an uprising. So I don't think Edmure's long for this world, but I don't know if we're actually going to see it, because now we realise that the Tullys are basically wiped out. And the Blackfish died off screen, and I'm still kind of upset about that. So we move across from Westeros into Essos to Meereen, to aka Meereen without their queen, and although we don't have the queen back yet, everything's going a lot better. Trading's commencing, people are happier, the Unsullied are marching through, making their presence known, everything's going well, and Tyrion's basically giving himself a clap on the back that everything's going great. They come across a red priest preaching to the people, and the people are awe-inspired listening to basically Daenerys' origin story. And of course Varys is skeptical, and he uses this analogy, just because you cut your shave your face with a straight razor doesn't mean that it won't go on to cut you. And he's basically saying they might be okay now, but they'll probably end up turning out bad in the end. But Tyrion's not hearing any of that, and they just say, all we need now is for our queen to come back. And Varys says, in a nice tone, oh, yeah, definitely, because I've had my heart broken too many times. And you just get this feeling, oh, wouldn't it be great for him to meet her? But then you find out that Varys is leaving to go to Westeros to try and get allies, aka probably in Dorne. And as he's leaving, he's saying goodbye, and he's trying not to make it emotional, and he says, I'll go on the rest of the way. I don't need the most famous dwarf in the city following me. And he says, hey, Tyrion says, the most famous dwarf in the world. And that's where you get this rare smile from Varys, and it's just so unfair that we just got them back together, and I just wish they'd had more scenes together and less of those uncomfortable Missandei and Grey Worm scenes. But hopefully his schemings will be seen next season, and it won't just be, we'll see him only when he comes back to Meereen. I want to see him in Westeros under, the disguises and everything that he has to do to make it work. It then cuts to the scene with Tyrion, Missandei and Grey Worm, and he's basically peer pressuring them to drink wine, and they try to have a wee joke, and although they're not the most funny people, there's a bit of a tension given when Missandei and stuff are drinking, and Grey Worm's dry humour comes along, but it's all kind of broken up by the fact that the next scene is Missandei and Tyrion seeing that the masters of, the wise masters of Yunkai and, all those other places come in, and like she says, the masters have come for their property. And at first I thought this meant, is this some supposed thing that they're supposed to do? Or you realise later that no, they're not coming under the agreement they've made. They're coming here to start a fight, and they start to bombard the city with these fireballs and all this kind of stuff, and you realise that they've been at it for a while. It's starting to get dark. But you think, well, as it pans up to the Great Pyramid, well, we might be okay because it's quite high up, it's quite an impervious structure. And as Tyrion notices a shaking and a thudding noise from above, you think, oh my god, could they have actually got these fireballs that high in the air? Is this it? Are we seriously fucked? And as they all prepare to guard because they think something's happening and they hear movement out in the balcony, the Unsullied create this sort of barrier with their spears, and as one moves forward in a defensive stance, he picks up his staff and they all go down into a supplementing tone, and Daenerys walks in, and you're like, oh, thank you, she's back. Just at the right time. And yes, you're like, this is just so predictable, but at the same time, this is what you want. She's showing up at a bad time, even though they've had a little change in fortunes in some way. And as you see her come in, there's a shot of her from the door, and you see Drogon flying off. Now hopefully he's flying off to go and set these other ships on fire, and hopefully this will mean that they've came at the right time. The Dothraki Screamers are going to cause a lot of damage to any of the Volantis men, the Wise Masters and their men on the ground. And hopefully, the way I think it'll hopefully go is that they'll be so overwrought by the dragon. I was ready to call it dinosaur. Jesus Christ, my mind is not working. That Drogon and hopefully the other two dragons will cause such a presence that they'll all start to either turn back, or they'll make them leave their ships, and maybe they'll be able to take those ships and make examples of these so-called Wise Masters. I hate that they're called the Wise Masters because there's nothing wise about them. They're just money-lending, money-grubbing slavers. And I just hope that, although we know that next week's about the Battle of the Bastards, will we actually see anything from the other storylines, or will it be based on the Winterfell storyline? But we'll find out about that soonish, because it's actually airing tonight. We then move on to the end of the episode with our only Stark scenes in Braavos with Aria, and it picks up with Lady Crane playing Cersei, mourning the death of her son, and she's obviously took on board what Sansa said about being more angry and vengeful about her son being murdered, and it actually comes off as really rapturous. It's making all the crowd cry, and you realise it's really good insight that she got. And when she comes back to get changed, she hears something behind a stack of clothes on a rail, and that's when she finds Arya injured. And I had no doubt when I saw this that she was going to take care of her, and she does. She patches up her wounds. She explains that she learned to do so after having many fights with her previous exes, and she gives her some food, even though it's not very tasty food, and she explains, what are you going to do now? And Arya's weighing up her options. Does she go east further into Essos, or west? She's actually, if she went west right now, she'd be about directly next to the Fingers, so she'd be pretty far north, and it's a very short journey. We even hear about Bianca getting her face messed up, and you're thinking, did she cut her? Did she break her jaw or something? But it's really nice that they have this sort of talk, and she gives her the milk of the poppy, and it puts her to sleep. And the next day, this scene, I just remember thinking, it looked like Cat over Aria, and it's like, this is nice. Of course, it doesn't last. She goes into the next room to possibly get more medication. Someone that looks like a man but is the same height as a waif. Turns out the waif is wearing one of the faces. She comes, she kills Lady Crane. Arya comes through and she finds her broken in a heap over this chair, bleeding, and the waif reveals herself, and she says, you know what, she would have died painlessly if you'd done your job, and now look at her, basically saying this is all your fault, and the many-faced god is promised a name, and he's supposed to have it, and now he has another name, and she's coming for you. And when she realises the fright and the fear and the shock on Arya's face, she's so gleeful, and you're thinking to yourself, she is one smug bitch for a so-called no one. And that's when it turns into this whole big running fighting sequence, and Arya jumps off the balcony and she lands on the ground, and she's obviously sore. She clutches her stomach. Now at this point I just want to say, obviously people are going, well, how has she managed to do this, because she's really fucked up and injured. Well, put it this way, she's tougher than you think. She's got milk of the poppy in her system, so she's maybe numb. there's the whole flight and fights response of adrenaline, and she's ran off running. And this is where the funny jokes come in about the Waif being kind of like the Terminator T-1000, and I have to admit I think that, because there's a bit where Arya's running and it looks like she's further away, and the Waif is running up on a wall and she jumps across and gets down, and Arya's obviously like shit, and she just keeps barreling down, like she doesn't even be affected by the fact that she's jumped off this high wall. She's got the bloody knife still in her hand and she's charging. Arya does to try and make her own charge. She jumps from this upper part and tries to do this parkour jump, but she lands on the steps. She lands on a bunch of orange baskets, but she starts to fall down the steps. And the most agonizing part about it is it's not one or two steps. She just keeps falling and falling, and after a certain point, when she hits a certain area, blood starts to seep out, and there's blood all over these oranges, and she's lying huddled on the ground, and she touches her wound and she realizes she's in trouble because she's obviously unbuckled her stitches. She jumps to the side and goes down into this alleyway, which we find out that as she moves along and she's really bloody and it looks like she's almost down for the count, she moves into this alleyway that turns out to be where that little alcove is where she keeps her stuff. There's one candle burning, and the Waif comes in. The Waif closes the door and she says, "Don't worry, it'll all be over soon. On your knees or on your feet." And obviously she's so confident and smug that this is how it's going to end, that she's going to kill her. And Arya reaches for Needle and stands up, and the Waif says, "You know that won't help you." And there's this cocksureness about her, and you're like, oh please. And when Arya lifts up her needle to her face like this, she closes her eyes and there's this stillness over her, and she goes and she slices the candle and everything turns to black. Now, we don't know what happens, but as we move into the scene in the House of the Black and White, it cuts to Jaqen coming across one of the walls of the Hall of Faces, and he sees the face, and it's the face of the Waif. And I'm not just saying this, but I never had in any doubt that her face was going to be on that wall, because the whole point of her being blind was she learnt a strength from being able to fight in the dark than she ever did with her eyes open. Now, it cuts to her and she presses her sword up against Jaqen's chest, and she said, "You sent her to kill me." And he says, "Yes. But here you are and there she is," as if to say maybe he anticipated this, and her eyes are watering at this point, and you can tell she's really emotionally torn and upset about it. And he says, "Finally a girl is no one." And Arya says, "A girl is Arya Stark of Winterfell, and I'm going home." And it's like, yes, finally, yes, that's who you are. We always knew that's who you are, and as much as you were in this organization, she wasn't even a full faceless man yet, right? But this realization that she's leaving is just the culmination. And as he looks at her, he smiles and nods as if like an agreement or an understanding. And I think he always suspected that she was not no one, and although she passed the test by drinking the poisonous water, there is that whole thing where he did send the Waif to kill her, but I think he always knew that the Waif wasn't truly no one, that she was full of all these jealousies and these hang-ups that she had from her previous life that was probably stirred up when Arya showed up, another highborn lady, not as highborn. I mean, the Waif was never as highborn as Arya. And the fact that the Waif is dead and Arya's here, the many-faced god had his death. Either way, if he didn't get the person he was supposed to, like the name, then it had to be substituted, and in the end he had to get a life, and the life was the Waif. So it's evened out. But I always suspected that Jaqen always knew that she would come out on top of that she learnt something, she learnt skills, and although I don't think he really suspected she was ever going to be a faceless man. I think he saw someone that needed a way to become stronger, and he could help her because she helped him. And although she could have went on to be a faceless man, she was never going to give up being Arya Stark. But at the same time, she never betrayed any vows, so I don't think there's going to be faceless men in her future trying to kill her. I think that has wound up the storyline. The Waif got her comeuppance for her own version of sinning against the faceless man, because she was an actual faceless man. She was. Arya wasn't. And the Waif just reiterated the fact that Arya was never going to become a faceless man, because when challenged by someone like that was so jealous and probably hateful towards her, she realises, you know what, I've got bigger fish to fry. I had to kill you because I had to save my own life, but I've got my own priorities. I'm gonna be Arya Stark of Winterfell all my life, and I need to get back to kicking some ass, because she's not some helpless girl. Well, don't get me wrong, she has her moments of, you know, not weakness, but, well, vulnerabilities. But she is going home, and if you remember, if you go back to the beginning where the map is, and like I said, Braavos is the nearest you can get to Westeros on the plain of Essos, right? Directly across from it is the Fingers, and if she gets a boat to get her across from that point, she'll be nearer the north than she would be as if she was further down. So it's not like Daenerys and being further over. So overall, what did I think of the episode? I really enjoyed the finishing up of Arya's storyline. I think it was much needed. I think seeing the Waif have her face on the wall in a grisly way, even though I don't think that face is going to be useful because it wasn't taken off the proper way, it's a good ending. But at the same time, whereas her death in the dark makes sense because it leads back to Arya's blindness and the strength she got from being blind, and that's more played upon in the books about the strengths she gets from being blind. They didn't really touch upon a lot of that in the show, but the Waif dying off screen makes sense. I didn't like what happened to the Blackfish at all. I'll never ever be happy with that. I think that they could have made it that he left with Brienne and Pod, and it would have been much better for him to fight for the family that he has left rather than die standing in his home. And I get that he's really passionate, but that castle is Lannister Tully property, and as for Edmure, like I said earlier, I don't think he's going to last very much longer. He's going to end up dead, and his son is probably going to end up being the de facto Lord of Riverrun when he comes of age. And Walder Frey ain't got much time left in him, so I think that he'll probably be the protector regent of that area until obviously he dies or the child becomes old enough to be seen as a ruler. And when it comes to the Cersei Lannister storyline and the trial by combat being finished off, I like that was a really good twist. The only thing that I don't like about it is obviously there'll be no big massive fight. I hope this means that Gregor Clegane, aka the Mountain, aka Zombie Mountain, will not be just twiddling his thumbs in the next 2 episodes. But I'd like to digress something before I go on to the next part. There are spoilers floating around on the internet, and some really good spoilers, and unfortunately I came across them when some swine put something in the comments of another video I was watching, and I'm not happy. So obviously I got a bit in between my teeth and I had to check it out, and some spoilers, some turn out to be fake and haven't came to much, but this one spoiler person has managed to be on ball with things quite a bit in advance, and if that's true, then the Mountain will get some action, but not the action we want. The Beric, Dondarrion and Thoros of Myr being brought back, I thought, as soon as I saw them, I actually got really sad and deflated, because it meant the end of a possible storyline. I know I talk about the books in a mild form, I'm not going to go into it, but there was something in the books. I mean, they've cut out lots from the books, and I understand it's different, because in the books the story is told from a point of view character like Tyrion or Daenerys and different characters, and I understand when they cut out whole chunks of things like they did for the Dorne storyline. But there's certain storyline, the Lady Stoneheart storyline, that I think should not be admitted. It should not be cut. And they've definitely cut it. There's no way it's coming in unless they come up with some weird convoluted way to make it work. But it's too late now. And that is something from the books that I think they should never have omitted. But I just keep telling myself, if you really enjoy the show, and there are some really snobby people when they get on with the whole book thing, quite frankly, there are certain things you want to see and certain things you don't, but at the end of the day, the show is only based and adapted from the books. So I'm quite happy to go along with the TV show and at this point be quite surprised. But remember, there's certain twists that'll be from the writers from the show, the creators of the show, versus the twists that come from the books. And there's been things in the show that happened from the soon-to-be coming Winds of Winter book, like the whole Hodor and how he became Hodor. That was heartbreaking, and as much as I love the writers on the show, there's no way that they could be that crafty and come up with something that good. That was just straight out of the mind of George R.R. Martin. But I'm just going to get really stuck in with this whole what's there, what isn't there. Overall though, considering all my ramblings, I would give that an 8 out of 10. Highlights obviously is Sandor Clegane, his scenes in the Riverlands, the mountain, getting some sparrow action by ripping the head off one. Obviously this conversation between Jaime and Brienne, that was fantastically put. But yes, the lowlights for me was the Blackfish being killed off screen. I think he deserved better than that. But the way it ended with Aria makes up for a lot of stuff, because we care more about her as a main character and as her journey's progressed than we do of other characters. So the fact that her storyline has been wrapped up in Braavos, I am really happy with, because that gives us a happiness right before the penultimate episode. And episode 9 always comes up with shocks, right? It's been a big thing since the start. When Ned Stark lost his head in episode 9 in season 1, it's been a recurrent theme, the same thing with the Red Wedding. But I'm really looking forward to the next episode. I am going in trying to guard my heart, because usually sometimes you feel sick watching it. There's this whole shaky anticipation watching it. But I absolutely love the show. I am continuing to support it. I'm sorry these videos don't come out soon enough. I'm really struggling with this damn virus. It's just taken forever and it's taken all my energy. And I'm looking forward to getting on with the Age of Heroes videos that I'm working on as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I'm sorry it's not totally up to snuff, but I'd love to hear your feedback, your comment, and what you think's going to happen in the next episode. And like and subscribe. I can't thank you enough for the support I've had so far, and we're a small channel, but thank you again. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.